Hi, today I'm going to make scones. We're going to make blueberry scones because that happens to be the fruit I have on hand that needs to be used up. So I've got all my ingredients pre-measured here. In this small bowl, we have 1/3 cup of sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And I'm just stirring it up really quickly to make sure they're all combined with each other. And in my larger bowl here, I have 2 cups of flour. I'm going to pour the sugar and baking powder in there. And I do almost all of this with my hand, you'll see. I'm just stirring in the baking powder, sugar. Oh, and I forgot, 1/2 teaspoon of salt as well. I will have the recipe on my website for you, so no need to take notes. And I'm just literally picking up the flour with my hand and squeezing and making sure it's all fully combined. All right, so it's our dry ingredients. I'm going to just put that aside for a second. And now I'm going to make the mix of the wet ingredients. And our wet ingredients are 1 egg. I'm just going to crack that into a bowl. And 1/2 cup of sour cream, which I've pre-measured out here. I'm going to just scrape that into the same bowl as the egg. I'm just scraping the sour cream into the bowl. I'm just scraping the sour cream into the bowl here. This is the one time I'm not using my hands, but I can actually use my fingers to scrape it out of this cup. Okay, I've got all the sour cream out of that measuring cup, and I'm just going to whip the egg and the sour cream together. I'm looking for a fairly fluid consistency here. There we go. So that's a really nice mix there. Oh, looks like there's more sour cream in the cup here. So I'm just going to make sure it all goes into this bowl because yummy sour cream, we don't want to lose it. This recipe calls for 8 tablespoons or a stick of butter. And there is a trick to doing this that I learned when I found this recipe on the internet that works really well. You want frozen butter if you have it, or I stuck this in the freezer for a little bit just to make it as hard as possible. And I'm going to use a cheese grater. And I'm just going to take my stick of butter and run it over the cheese grater over our dry to mix the flour and the butter together. And literally I'm just holding the plate of a IKEA cheese grater over my bowl and running my stick of bread over it and letting the strips of butter that look like cheese into my flour mix. And one of the reasons you want it frozen is because, first of all, the chunks stay pretty together as chunks, and you kind of want that. You don't want the butter all melted into the thing, but it's also harder to handle in your hand as you're grating it when it's not frozen. There we go, we're almost done here. You could use a pastry cutter and cut in soft butter, but I find this technique gives you a better, more consistent meal to the mealy texture to the butter and flour combination. There we go. So I've got my whole stick done now. I'm going to just scrape off the back of the cheese grater here, and I'm going to take some of my flour from my bowl and just wipe it off on the cheese grater just to get that last little bit of melty butter off of it. Tapping it with my hand. And I'm going to now quickly toss this butter and flour so it's fully combined in the bowl. You don't need to use an additional pastry cutter because you'll see that the large pea-shaped cuts that you would get are already there from our grated butter. And I'm literally just feeling through to make sure we have even butter and flour distribution throughout the entire mix. Looking good. All right, my hands are all covered in butter, so they're extra greasy. And now I'm going to take our, once I found where I put it, sour cream and egg mix. Whip it up again and pour it into our bowl here, the big bowl with the flour. Wipe down with my fingers, get all the lovely parts of that in there. Tap my fork out on the side of the bowl. And now I'm literally just going to take my hands and combine. And what I'm looking for is a very solid dough now. So I'm taking all my flour mix and combining it. I'm stirring, I'm not mixing very hard. I'm just kind of picking up, and when I feel wetness with my fingers, I am taking those wet pieces and covering them with loose flour in the bowl. You don't want to mix this too much or your scones will get more solid and less crumbly. A good scone is a little crumbly. And it's time for our blueberries. We'll put our blueberries in here. Frozen fruit works really well for this. I probably put a bit too many blueberries in there, but I've been told there's never too much fruit in scones. You want about half a cup to a cup. And I'm just mixing it all together. The frozen fruit will keep that butter more crumbly as well. So I just happen to have an old basket of blueberries that we need to cook up, so I'm using it. Okay, now I need to do the final stage of this dish. Just scraping off as much of the batter on my hands as possible because I need to go grab a cutting board and I don't want to put batter all over my kitchen. All right, here I have my cutting board. I'll just put all my stuff out of the way there. And I have a little bit of additional flour here that I'm going to just spread all over my cutting board. Just took a pinch of it and I just took it in the center and I want to just flatten it out on the cutting board. We'll take our mix and we'll dump it out onto this cutting board. It's still pretty crumbly, but that's okay because it will come together really quickly here. There we go. And now I'm just going to take my hands and scoop out from the edges into the center of this mass and pat. And basically I'm just forming it now. There we go. And now I'm squeezing down, and of course squeezing down will crush some of those blueberries. But that's okay because the juice will add some moisture to our scones here. I'm a little, there we go. We're gonna kind of turn this over a bit here. The upper surface is moister than the bottom because of those that flour on the board. Squeezing it in here, making sure that I get no runaway blueberries. There we go. There we go. It's starting to feel like a really nice mass right now. And the texture you want is slightly tacky to your hands. And we want, when I pick it up, for it to not break apart like it did there. If it does, we have to keep working it together. Okay. Bit of a messy process, this one, but the result is worth every minute of cleanup. It's still kind of coming apart on me, so I'm going to flip it over again. Take the moisture parts and work them into those drier, crumbly bits. There we go. All right. So today I'm only going to bake about 3 or 4 of these. And then we're going to freeze the rest. So all we need to do now is cut these into the shape we want. You can use a biscuit cutter, you can use anything you want at all to shape these. I'm hoping you're seeing now that all that crumbliness is gone at this point. And it is about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch thick, and you want it evenly across the surface thickness. I'm just taking the edges and gathering up in the edges. And I'm just going to use a knife to cut these out today. So I'm just grabbing a paring knife here, and I'm going to go across the center. And I'm going to go across, perpendicularly across the center. And I'm going to go bisect those to make them into quarters. And I'm going to bisect again. So this is now ready. I'm going to pick up each of these individual quarters. And there is a scone. And the scone's a little crumbly. So what I do now is I'll put it on our cookie sheet and bake it, or put it on an aluminum cookie sheet and stick it in the freezer to freeze. Once it's solid in the freezer and all together, we're going to want to put them in an individually, a Ziploc bag. So you freeze them separated on a cookie sheet the same way you would bake them. But once they're all frozen in one piece, you want to put them in a Ziploc bag so that they don't get freezer burned. So I will come back and show you 2 or 3 of these cooked up. Actually, I'm probably going to cook all of them up because I didn't realize I was only going to get 8 here. So I'm going to cook these up for you and we'll be back in a little bit. All right, so here we have our final pan of scones. They are steaming, bubbly hot, and I would not bite into one of these yet because you will burn your tongue. But let me see if I can Show you they swelled up quite nicely and they're a little crumbly. So once these cool, these will make a delicious treat. Please press subscribe. Let me know what you want me to cook for you and tell me what you think.